about telling the truth, and it's about my integrity as a person. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna call a man she. I refuse to lie. It's about my personal integrity and my accountability. But, if you see something wrong happening, you stand up and you say no.
Well, folks, I'm with the one and only Meghan Murphy. Remember when I went back down to the library in Toronto, it was October 2019, and Meghan Murphy was giving a talk, and all hell broke loose. Let's just throw to an excerpt from 5 years ago. You're not going to believe what you're going to see here.
Oh, okay then. Well, I can understand that you are a pro-censor and a pro-deplatformer,
I'm
but
pro-punching you in the mouth is what I am.
oh, so violence too.
Hate speech isn't free! Trans men are men! Trans women are women! And trash is trash!
How can you just try to shut people down and say, no, you're transphobic? Phobia is a fear, an irrational fear of something. We are not in fear of you.
What does that mean, by the way? TERFs are the flat earthers of gender, sir. Off. Is that what it means?
Nobody talks about
Well, it's very. Oh no, thank you for it.
I'm here with my pastor.
Okay.
It's a godly time. I'd like you to get out of my space.
Is that the kind of language you'd use in a church, sir?
So, Meghan, that was just absolutely hellacious. I can tell you, with the amount of trans activists, Antifa, anarchists, all unhinged, all super angry. You mentioned off camera, even the police were afraid that day. I mean, if the police weren't there, I think they really would have, taken me to the woodshed, some of those activists. But here we are. You are a feminist, but they use a derogatory term to describe you. A TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist. First of all, what in blue blazes does that really mean?
Well, apparently it means someone who knows the difference between a man and a woman. It's a very funny term because that term TERF is used to describe essentially anyone who challenges gender identity ideology, anyone who challenges the idea that a man can become a woman and vice versa. It's revealing because I think that the women who first started pushing back against this were these radical feminists. And I think a lot of people thought they were being a bit crazy. Why do you care what these guys do? Leave them alone. But lo and behold, now here we are in Crazy Town.
It is astonishing. I would consider you to be a classical feminist. And by that, I mean, back in the day, if there were men trying to get into women's sports and women's shelters and women's prisons, feminists would be leading the outcry. But modern day feminists, Meghan, they're either sitting this one out. Maybe you can educate me. Is it a matter of that going up against so-called trans women, that's too much of a third rail issue? Or do they believe that trans women are real women?
I don't think that they believe that so-called trans women, so men who are identifying as women, are actually women. I think they're cowards. And I think that they care about their careers. I think that, in Canada, I think pretty much every single so-called feminist institution, all of these organizations that are meant to protect and support vulnerable women, for example, women who are helping women leaving situations of domestic violence, women in poverty who need shelter, they've all lied, essentially. They all go along with this trans women are women lie and thrown women and girls across Canada under the bus. And I think it's disgusting, but it's all about funding, right? It's like they're trying to keep their jobs, they're trying to keep their little institution going, and they won't stand up. And I don't really care why. It's the truth, and what they're doing and saying is causing harm. But it's pathetic.
In this business, Meghan, they always say, follow the money. And I never thought about the financial aspect. I think that's an excellent point. But in the meantime, they have sacrificed their cause for their existence. I mean, I remember the Boston Marathon. I don't think it was until the mid-'60s that women were allowed to run in the marathon. Sometimes you'd have a woman jump the fence and start to run, and the cops would gang tackle her. Now, all marathons have a women's division, and yet women's sports are under attack, and these modern day feminists are just shrugging their shoulders. I think it's appalling.
I was a feminist for my entire life. You know, I can't even recall not being a feminist. And in the past few years, I've stopped identifying as a feminist. And it's not because I don't support women's rights anymore. I certainly do. I fight for women's rights in Canada still, just as I always have. But I feel like, what does feminism mean if these women, first of all, can't even define what a woman is, but won't stand up for the most vulnerable women in prison, for example? The most vulnerable women in Canada, I would argue, are women in prison. You know, they don't have rights. They're coming from places of trauma, often addiction, mental health issues, poverty. Indigenous women are overrepresented in Canadian prisons, and they fully abandon these women to the most dangerous male criminals in the country. And won't, you know, the government won't talk about it. The media won't talk about it. Thank God Heather's talking about it. Heather Mason is one of the only women who's been banging the drum about this issue. And I think some people are finally starting to listen. But it's abhorrent. I don't know how these women can call themselves feminists.
Well, I'll challenge you on one point. The government is talking about it in terms of the Justin Trudeau Liberals are responsible for males just saying, I identify as a female, and bang, you're in the Kitchener Penitentiary for women. This from our fake feminist prime minister. But it's all being done, Meghan, in the scope of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I would say if you're putting men into a female prison or a female shelter and into female sports, that's not diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is garden variety misogyny.
I totally agree. And I would also say that it's actually exclusion. Because in particular, when we're talking about girls' sports and women's sports, they're now being excluded from their own sports because men are competing instead. And men are inherently mostly going to be better athletically than women are. They're stronger, they're faster, their bodies are different. This is no insult to female athletes who are incredible, but girls are losing out to opportunities, to scholarships, to championships, because these men, I mean, you covered that volleyball tournament where there was 5 men?
It was Seneca College and Centennial College, and 5 of the 12 starters, there was 3 for Seneca, 2 for Centennial, were biological men. I mean, I went to see a female varsity volleyball game. Instead, we saw a sausage fest, for goodness sakes. And I can see a day, Meghan, in which, you know, in our lifetime, there will be the male varsity team, and then there will be the male B varsity team. These will be all the loser males that can't crack the male A team. And that male B team was that team that once upon a time used to be called the female team.
Right, exactly. And I mean, I wanted to speak to your point about misogyny, because I think any man who would do this is the poorest excuse for a male on the planet. You know, he knows he's cheating. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows that there's some girl who's going to be sitting on the sidelines, who's going to miss out on a scholarship so that he can get it instead. He knows he's mediocre because, as you said, you know, he didn't make the boys' team or the men's team. You know, these men don't care at all about women and girls and what they're doing to women and girls. I think it's totally shameful.
I agree. I think they might be mentally ill, but more to the point, Meghan, who do you have more contempt for? That gender-bending loser male pretending to be a female so he can play varsity sports, or those in authority, Volleyball Canada, Volleyball Ontario, the deans of these colleges, the Ontario Athletic Association, the human rights commissions and tribunals, who all collectively say, this is a good thing. We stand by these trans women, which are really men pretending to be women. So again, who do you have more contempt for? The individual athletes gaming the system, or those allowing them to game the system?
That's a really tough question, but you know, these are the people in power who have the power and have the responsibility to say no, to protect these sports, to protect the girls playing these sports. You know, these are the people in charge. These are the people who are making these decisions. I mean, men identifying as women, that's been going on for at least a few decades now, but it's only recently that it's become such a big problem, and that's because the policies have changed, the legislation has changed. It's because these institutions and because these people in power have gone along with it and supported it, so they are responsible. You know, we could have said, okay, you wear a dress, whatever, do your thing. We never had to go so far as to change the laws and the policies and to start letting men compete as women in female sports and letting men into women's prisons, letting men into girls' change rooms, for goodness sakes. I mean, somebody should have said no a long time ago, and they kept saying yes, and they're still saying yes. So it is their responsibility, and they are the ones who are accountable.
I totally agree, Megan. I mean, if you want to wear a dress, pretend you're a member of the other gender, and you're just living your life in suburbia, not affecting anyone, hey, listen, I love Halloween. I just don't celebrate it 365 days a year, but if that's what you're into, fine. But the moment you start taking away spots, like you said, taking away scholarships, sexually abusing women in a shelter or prison facility, that is completely offside. Last question, Megan. You have so many inexplicable haters out there. They're trying to cancel you. They're trying to intimidate you. You're not bending the knee. You're one of the bravest women I know. What is it that motivates you not to bend the knee, not to surrender to all these terrible haters out there?
You know, when I started speaking out about this, which was, almost 10 years ago, it wasn't because this issue affected me personally. A lot of these haters will say, how does this affect you? What does this have to do with you? And I'm like, it doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with all women and girls in Canada, all women and girls everywhere. It has to do with free speech. It has to do with our constitutional rights that we're losing, our right to freedom of expression, our right to say that men aren't women, which, Justin Trudeau is trying to criminalize. So, it's about telling the truth, and it's about my integrity as a person. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna call a man she. I refuse to lie. It's about my personal integrity and my accountability. But, if you see something wrong happening, you stand up and you say no.
Megan, look on the bright side. So far, so good. I don't see the lunatic fringe picketing outside, unlike October 2019. That's a victory. Have a great speech tonight here at this event.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay. Thank you, Megan.
Thanks.
Wow, the common sense espoused at this conference. It was a shock to the system, given the garbage that we have to listen to from the radical elites, from politicians to our mainstream media types. Folks, if you want to take a stand against transanity, please go to transmadness.com. That's transmadness.com. Sign the petition, and please, if you're able to, kindly make a donation.